Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles, founder and CEO at Family Office Association. I did several days ago, and we're in May during the midst of COVID-19, a LinkedIn Live. And it was very interesting and I guess a smashing success. I decided to do a video about it because I think it's a topic that many of you are going to be very, very interested in. I titled it, How the World's Greatest Single-Family Offices Are Investing During COVID-19 Times. It's my insights shared from talking with over 100 truly big and significant single-family offices during this crisis, and it's very, very eye-opening. So before I get to that, let me give a little bit of context. As noted, I'm the founder and CEO at Family Office Association. We're a global membership organization dedicated to single-family offices. And really at the heart of it, I consider myself a researcher, and I guess you could say a thought leader, really exclusively dedicated. My life, my passion, my obsession, my purpose. Someone has to do it, to single-family offices. And of course, investing is always going to be an incredibly important topic to talk about. So we're going to get into a whole bunch of asset classes and really how families from $1 billion to some I have over $50 billion of net worth and global. So they've been around the world, not all US-centric. What they're doing during today's times. Now, again, just because they're doing it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good fit for you, even if you're a billion-dollar family. Every family has different liquidity needs, risk tolerance, and goals. But I do think it provides interesting insight to what we're seeing and a little bit of insight to the access and resources that the members of my organization, Family Office Association, receive to help them not only have better peer-to-peer connections and connectivity in general, but to have the right research and thought leadership at their fingertips to hopefully make better strategic and tactical decisions in their own family or family office scenario. First, what I practically always like to start with, you have to remember the families are already very, very rich. They have a single family office. When it comes to the financial aspect of it, they already won. What they're really concerned about is the opportunity to hold on to what they got and to pass on their resources to their heirs or how they deem applicable through philanthropic initiatives and charitable initiatives in general, as opposed to having governments and via taxation and confiscation, as we like to say, kind of make that decision for them. So it's really important to understand in practically every aspect, the family doesn't have to do anything. They could be invested all in cash, whatever. They got $500 million, $1 billion. They're going to have enough money in theory to last for generations to come. So really, in my opinion, for a family office, depending on the goals of the family, it comes down to hedging and mitigating risk, specifically black swan and significant risk. But even then, if you have a long-term perspective, you could withstand gyrations specifically in the markets. But COVID-19 is a real case scenario. I don't know if I would quite call it black swan, but pretty close to it. It certainly is a risk that could cause devastation, initially at least, to a portfolio, and how families are adapting is going to be very, very important. But I really want to emphasize they don't, in theory, have to do anything. They could be all in cash, and they're going to be fine. Why would they not want to? Well, a lot of them still want to grow their wealth. A lot of them, generations in, may have multiple family members and situations, trust kind of pulling at the assets and resources. And sometimes it is ego. It's what their friends and counterparts are doing. And you feel like you have to, even at that level, kind of keep pace with the others. I'm not saying I agree with that. Actually, I don't. It should be strictly on what you want to accomplish as a family office. And we're very big on hedging and mitigating devastating risk. I mean, to me, that's really the heart. A family office should kind of stop problems before they begin and help the family make decisions that they want to make too, that's going to make them thrive generationally over time. Not just financial capital, but their social, their intellectual, their legacy. It's a lot more than just money, but let's face it, certainly money is going to be a part of it. I'll start with that this crisis is in many ways different, very different than the financial crisis from 12, 13 years ago, 2007, 08, where it seems like everything kind of correlated to one and it all went down. There are definitely winners and losers in the markets, broadly speaking, during COVID-19. So hopefully it'll be more on the thoughts that I'm hearing and have notes on from my families, coupled with a little bit of my interpretation and thoughts on it, and hopefully for the next 25 or 30 minutes make it, I hope, somewhat engaging for you. So, usually an investor is going to make a decision via their investment policy statement and their asset allocation to be either more strategic and potentially be very, very long-term in their thinking and not get knocked off course by gyrations, even very negative in the marketplace. And others are going to be more tactical, especially during times like this when there's dislocations, to look at it as potentially buying opportunities that may take them off their investment policy statement and asset allocation, but we may understand why. There's opportunities being created that perhaps cannot be just passed by, and it's an opportunity to be more tactical and enact on those. Always understand, too, that cash liquidity provides freedom. It creates the opportunity to do nothing and know that you have liquidity, but also creates buying opportunity because you have the cash and liquidity, whether it's public or private markets, broadly what's going to be distressed during a time like this. Why don't we begin on the allocation side with public equities? So on the surface, COVID-19 comes along, the markets are crashing. They were at their low, on March 23rd, and really a big hit. And they've made in many ways, to many families, a shockingly good comeback. But when you look at that we're still in the midst with no vaccine of COVID-19, we have unemployment like we haven't seen in so many different decades, and even some level of uprising in certain states starting to happen, you would think that the stocks would just keep on tumbling downwards, but they're not. Why? Well, that's always the magic and the emotional aspect of the markets. Families would assume that a lot has to do with a stimulus package, at least here in the US and in many other countries around the world, pumping more and more money, adding to the deficit, I might add, trillions and trillions of dollars. I'm sure trillions more to come. The elections probably, of course, play a part in that upcoming here in the US. You want the masses to feel like they're getting something and be happy, so they vote favorably, the perception for you. So are the markets artificially being propped, if you want to use that word? I'm going to go with, and families are going to agree with me for the most part, yes. But that doesn't mean that you just ignore the fundamentals and really still, again, look at it whether strategically or tactically. So this could be a market where finally, it's been a long time, where active management may actually play off. And might I even say, long-short hedge fund managers, which have generally done, and I'm based in Greenwich, Connecticut, and friends with many of them, but in general have done terrible. This might be a market for some of them to truly put their intellectual firepower and capability to the test, and some of them, shockingly, might even shine during this time. You would look at potentially an index of public equities, very broad, whatever, 5,000 of them, as being there's going to be winners, there's going to be losers. And it seems like the winners are to some degree a little easier to identify, but that's also going to bring their stock price up. And then you have to look at so many different factors. But I would potentially look at Amazon, Walmart, Netflix, Zoom. There's many others, but aren't some of these apparent winners? So perhaps we're seeing families be more concentrated in their public equities, which of course are going to be liquid, so that's another advantage. If they want to use leverage, not that many families are, but in theory they could, buying at a low interest and potentially something that's going to go up in value. And again, no one knows. Maybe Amazon doesn't go up as much as families think it is, but if you just look logically, it would look like potentially a very, very good play. So sure, families are very active in public equities. They're probably looking to be more concentrated, potentially looking at more active management, possibly long-short managers. And again, these are the trends that we're seeing in talking to those families. I also have a decent base of relationships among, some of the top 50 institutional investors in the world that I like to keep my ear to the grindstone with, because again, I want to give research and thought leadership to my relationships and my members. Although they're different, they don't have the tax implications that families do, what smart investors are doing. And in me talking to VCs and hedge fund managers and kind of helping to put it all together to be of value to them is an important part of, I guess you could say, what we do. Let's move on a little bit to privates, established companies, but that are private companies. Well, there's a couple of ways to go about it. You have families that are going to be active, what's called direct investors in private. It's a little more rare. And you're going to have families that see the value of an illiquidity premium and are going to invest in a manager, aka a private equity fund. But you have some of the largest funds effectively doing terrible. Are they asset gatherers charging 2 and 20 and not living up to the potential that would be hoped? Yeah, that's probably going to be the case as families feel for some of them, but what's the alternative? For a family to potentially become more of an active direct investor in privates? What experiences do they have in specifically a given region or sector? That would be one question. And do they really have the resources internally? Most family offices on the investing side are going to do the investment policy statement, asset allocation, but they're going to be more of a monitoring, vetting, diligence, and monitoring, and hiring and firing the managers, more of an endowment or an institutional level approach, as opposed to being more of a direct investor. There's, of course, advantages to both. Being a direct investor, you're more actively involved in the process. You have more of a say in matters, partially depending on your level of investment, controlling, non-controlling, but potentially you can negotiate a board position, etc. You're not paying 2 and 20. So again, no doubt about it, for families that have the breadth of experiences, the talent, and the capital, that absolutely could be a way to go. But again, to have the talent to compete with the top firms for private equity talent, investment banking talent, and put it all together so it works within a team and a culture, and manage that, and have enough resources ready to deploy to take advantage of opportunity. Yeah, there's going to be some families that could do that, but perhaps that's asking for a lot for many families. Henceforth, they may believe in the value of investing in privates, so-called the illiquidity premium, and it's debatable, by the way, but nonetheless, again, depending on what metrics you look at, even with the 2 and 20 investing through a manager, it may still potentially be attractive for some, because you're hiring, you think, the best of the best. You believe in the research that you've done on, quote unquote, the asset class and investing in private equity, and feel that these people have an edge, and you want to make a strategic investment, which is far easier being an LP in the example that I give. But again, you're beholden to the GP, to their timeline and cycles, and what could be deemed to be 2 and 20 as expensive, but never forget, doing it properly internally and having the right talent and resources, that's very far from free. That's going to be expensive as well. So I would say 70 to 80% of the families, even those I spoke to, are going to be more allocators to managers from that perspective. Some are going to be almost exclusive, going direct. And a fair number are going to be a combination of both, but probably still leaning towards, except for maybe the public equity side, which is easier, but on things that are more complex, and private equities one, probably leaning towards, if they decide that's applicable to have in their portfolio, towards those kind of specific managers. Now that leads us to, and we're going to get to real estate shortly, but it's going to tie into what I'm going to say now on privates and broadly on real estate. And this is where during COVID-19, the families are, it's pretty obvious here, where they're seeing opportunity is going to be in distress. So you have situations where, whether private companies or real estate, are distressed via COVID-19 for obvious reasons. Their revenues are significantly down. They have expenditures. Maybe they were ready for an exit, and this just kind of pushes it along. And could you purchase something that you feel you might have an edge in, that you have knowledge about, and again, you have the resources to be able to do so? Might you be in a position where you could purchase something at a discount? 20, 30, 40% or more. A lot of the institutional money would be coming from New York, LA, Chicago, and they're a little bit more quarantined now. Their hands are a little more tied. It's an opportunity for them or for you to invest where that community, perhaps in the short term, is not as active as they could be if things were totally open up. So it's a little bit more local and regional. It's the relationships with the banks and the people in the community that can help you uncover opportunity in real estate and privates that you could be nimble and you could be effective on. And it's an opportunity to purchase at a discount. There's no guarantee it's going to work out. Maybe this crisis lasts even longer for multiple years. But again, families do have the advantage of they're not a fund. They're not beholden to LPs. They have time on their side. And these are, again, the tremendous advantages of a significant family or a single family office, which leads me into real estate. Wow, this is an area that could be gravely impacted, and families are all over the place. So what could potentially look good to them during COVID-19? Possibly in some strategic markets, multifamily housing. Millennials are getting married later. They're having less children. Traditionally like to be a little bit more urban, so willing to rent. COVID-19 could change that because of the population density and cause more of an outgrowth into suburban or even rural communities. And this affects the whole working environment as well. If you're talented at what you do in white-collar industries, in theory, you may be able to live anywhere, in Boise, Idaho, in Montana, in a different country, and still work for a company that's headquartered out of New York or San Francisco. So I get a little off track there. Multifamily housing could be intriguing. What's the problem during COVID-19? With the fact that you would think that interesting rentals for people would be of interest is suppose they can't pay the rent. That's a problem. So again, nothing is easy. If you want easy, just stay in cash. But if you want to get involved to be an investor and get the kind of returns that could keep ahead of taxes, inflation, and all of that, you know, certainly real estate is among the most common holdings that we're going to see in our research. You know, cash, public equities, and real estate are probably the big three for wealthy families really around the world. Storage facilities, that could be good during COVID-19. Potentially more manufacturing coming back to the U.S. That might be an interesting market that we're hearing from families as well. We have one family that does invest in office buildings. You would think, ooh, that's real risky at the moment. But they specifically, and they know they make less return on this, but again, hedging risk. They have relationships in their buildings with government long-term leases and clients, so government entities. That could work. Let's talk about the bad. Office real estate, other than what I just described. The whole dynamic for white-collar industries, especially in the San Franciscos and New Yorks, could completely change. And I don't know if it will ever come back to a normal, because I think that companies are adapting to more of a remote workforce with these kind of employees, with the advent of greater technology and the freedoms it's giving both the employer to have a global workforce and the employee to have opportunity to live wherever they want, like I said earlier, and have a level of control of their destiny. So office space, you think, maybe it could be purchased at a great discount, maybe it could be repurposed, but on the surface, that's an area that could be very, very challenged. Retail, obviously the same thing. Hotels could be gravely challenged, but again, Eventually, I think we'll have a vaccine for COVID-19. If you're buying distress now, it could create an opportunity that could be very, very attractive. So if you have the cash, if you have time on your side, and you have a level of connectivity and knowledge about a given community, this creates opportunities in distress, which certainly real estate is going to be a big part of. Let's turn our attention to VC. Dominated venture capital by the US, by the way. A little bit of competition from China and even Israel, but Israel's so small. But this is an industry generally very dominated by the US. Obviously, mainly the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, but New York, Boston, LA, San Diego, Boulder, parts of Texas, Austin, Miami, etc. So this is just really ingrained the entrepreneurial spirit and the resources of our universities. The ecosystem is very, very strong here in the US. But is it being shaken just a little bit? Yeah. And look at California, bad regulation, lots of taxes. I mean, looking what they're doing with Tesla, I think Elon Musk has some good points here. This is asking, and it's already happening, given regulation and taxes, a migration of some entrepreneurs as well as VC firms to diversify away from the Valley, a Nevada, a Texas, a Florida being some examples. But they do have a strong ecosystem that goes back decades, Stanford University. So we hope that Silicon Valley, but is it going to have the stranglehold of like 90% of VC moving forward, looking 5 or 10 years from now, with the cost of living there? And again, what I said about office space and white collar workers being more dispersed, I think you'll start to see, and the families feel that way, that ratio of the stranglehold get lesser and lesser, not just within here in the US, but, you know, with the rise of other countries, mainly China, and their VC community as well. VC creates interesting opportunity for family. You could certainly paint the picture as well, the 2 and 20 structure or more, that these are the pros, and probably 80% of what they invest in doesn't work out. So do you become a direct investor? Boy, you really better know that niche or industry, or I guess get lucky. Or this is one where you probably have to bite the bullet and go more through a fund and pay the fee. Is it worth it? Well, it tends to be very concentrated. The top 10 or 15 VC firms are generally the ones driving return. Always going to be exceptions. But this is one top heavy, a little bit more unlike PE, where it looks like it may pay off. But getting into these funds that have significant institutional investors and families that have been active allocators and re-upping in those funds for a long time, even if you're waiving a gigantic check, could be very, very hard. Some families get in through fund of funds, by the way. That's one option. So where you look at VC is during the challenging time that we're going through now. I am sure there's going to be entrepreneurs that are their most creative phase, creating what could be the next version of what we consider a Zoom, a Google, even a higher level. So there'll be interesting opportunities in tech and AI. VR and augmented reality is probably about to get a lot better, and that will be also force more the advent to the remote worker, even more gaming, those kind of things. So yeah, there's going to be opportunity in VC. It's hard to go, I mean, I guess you could be involved in a fund and possibly also get rights to be a co-investor and step up in certain deals. But again, these are sophisticated families that often have been active in VC and are super well connected and allocating money to different allocators for a long, long time. But yeah, is the potential, and does the family see the advent of technology rolling along, even robotics and machine learning? For sure. There are going to be losers. There always are. But it seems inevitable there's going to be some great, great winners in VC as well. How about gold? Well, interesting times. And we've had some amazing speakers on my podcast, Peter Schiff and others, about gold. Is it a deflationary hedge? Is it a hedge against inflation? It's been around for so long, more the older community of wealth is going to feel comfortable with it, probably more so as a hedge, given the markets are being somewhat artificially propped up. Gold hasn't probably popped up as much as people think, but it might be on the cusp. And how do you own it? Some owned it through an ETF like GLD. Some, of course, own physical gold, and gold mining stocks could be an opportunity as well. In my book, which gave Generally Effective Family Office a conservative approach a couple of years ago, because again, hedging risk and managing downside for a wealthy family probably should be the number one thing that they're concerned about. So gold is intriguing, and yeah, probably should make up some percentage, and does, of a lot of families' portfolios, and something that could potentially be that spike that pops up a lot in value, depending on how things play out further in COVID and the economies around the world. And yeah, you could paint a very ugly picture moving forward for the next 2 to 5 years, and gold potentially could be attractive. The younger audience probably looks at cryptocurrencies, Ethereum and certainly Bitcoin, as being potentially their version of gold, kind of against the fiat currency of countries, the discretion in countries that where they could confiscate your money even more than they do here. And they do here in the US through taxes, by the way. That's generally what I mean by the confiscation of capital. But it could be more onerous and worse in other parts of the world. And having resources that are somewhat off the grid makes it intriguing and potentially not tied into the poor government management and economics and deficits that many countries are having. So even among the older crowd, but certainly the younger, there's been an uptick of interest in blockchain technologies and very simply in cryptocurrencies, mainly Bitcoin. Is it moving the needle level where significant families are putting 10 or 15% of their capital? There are some, but very, very rare. But maybe going from 0 to 2 or 3% potentially seems to be making sense for some. Probably won't spend too much time on fixed income. Of course, concerns over the stability of the company that's issuing it, if it's a corporate bond. The challenge is because we're still far from over in COVID-19, let alone potentially the after effects. And then, of course, you have government-issued securities, treasuries. You know, we complain and moan, as probably I do, relative here in our own country, from politics to taxation, but there's so much, you know, we're all suffering during COVID-19, and in many ways, the U.S. is relatively, compared to others, pretty well positioned as a country, contract law, stable government, powerful military, oceans on both sides, friendly neighbors, a strong agriculture system. Now, our electrical grid, our infrastructure leaves something to be desired, and that might be something where, although it grows the deficit more, potentially, but that puts people to work and rebuilds our infrastructure, families believe that that's something that could potentially make sense. I didn't do too much in emerging markets. There's going to be winners, there's going to be losers. It's far more risky, but for families that may want to allocate a small percentage, you could probably make a case for it. Commodities will be covered. Gold. Generally, it looks like we could be potentially, some families feel, in a commodity boom for the next couple of years. So some are looking at it very, very carefully, but there's lots of challenges there, and oil's going to be another. So you do, in general, I would say there's a little bit of a push to families being somewhat bullish, I guess you could say, on commodities, but I know very, very few, like maybe none, that are putting like a third of their capital into it, but maybe going from nothing or 3 or 5% to maybe a notch more appears to be making sense for some families. You know, on oil, you had the challenge with Saudi Arabia and Russia and the U.S. both produce what it cost about $40 a barrel, where Saudi Arabia produces it at much, much less. So when it's selling for, what is it now, $28, $30 a barrel, still profitable for them, but not for the U.S. and other countries. Families are split. Some feel it's very, very challenged and keep away from it, and others feel, wow, it's a buying opportunity, it's a dislocation, let's buy more, because we're not quite there yet with solar and some of the clean tech initiatives, although they're coming. And perhaps on that note, impact investing. I would say 10 years ago, probably 10 or 15% of families, 20 years ago, 5%, and a perception the returns don't match non-impact investing. It's doing well during this crisis, and many ways doing better. So the opportunity of impact investing, investing for social awareness on climate change, on clean energy, on what perceived to be injustices, appear to be investments that are broadly doing well. And the number of families that I see that are actively, it's not 5 or 10 or 15% anymore. It's probably closer to a third to 40%. So this is a growing trend. This is something that the younger generation, including of wealth, is concerned about. And I think rightfully so. And the fact that the returns are doing better, that trend is going to only continue and go upwards. I bet you in 10 or 15 years, 70% plus of families will truly be active, quote unquote, impact investors. You have some niche things, agriculture, owning farmland, but the supply chain is so bad. It seems to be getting very local and regional with local farmers. And again, for a family that has experiences in it, maybe wants to diversify, I think it could be intriguing, but very competitive in its own way. And again, this requires a specific expertise, I would think, from that family who wants to be active as an investor. Didn't see too much on cannabis. It looks like broadly, though, during the crisis, doing relatively well. But the challenges of government regulation, although ironically, that also makes the potential for higher returns. But that still it is an overhang to the industry. If I had to give you a number from my 5 to 7% of families would have a little bit of capital in cannabis. And it seems like it's been about stable the last couple of years, not decreasing, but not increasing either. Like you're starting to see on blockchain and Bitcoin is more on an uptick. But it looks like it's going to be here to stay, and we'll see how that plays out. Again, like anything, right? There'll be winners and losers. You also have families that are active one-off investors in esoteric asset classes and something highly unique. Cell phone towers, railroad cars, specific Scandinavian bond opportunities. I mean, there's lots of different things, maybe for a very, very large family, sometimes perhaps not enough to move the needle, but for those that are looking for uncorrelated asset classes. But again, this crisis generally hasn't been much of an issue from that perspective, like 2007 and 8, when everything correlated to 1, and you looked for things that were uncorrelated. It still appears to be pretty good to be able to find that. But nonetheless, you'll have families that see tremendous opportunity from those perspectives. Kind of taking it to the home stretch with some closing thoughts. And again, families of wealth and their SFOs have some significant advantages. They have the cash, assuming they do, specifically liquid, and they have time on their side. They don't have to worry about like a GP, their LPs at investors. There's an old saying in the single family office community, you know, do I really want to take my kitchen and turn it into a restaurant that others I now have to service, and governmental entities are also peering in, making sure I fit certain guidelines? That analogy applies for families that want to potentially create GP structures and be more active taking in other investors. I would do so very, very carefully. It's tempting for families, and I kind of understand why. But again, you have some tremendous advantages being a very private, quote unquote, family office, and potentially why change that. There are families on all sides of the fence relative to what appears to be countries to some degree nationalizing, adding to our deficit, investing in public companies to keep them afloat, but they also employ a lot of people. And there's other factors. It's a very, very tough decision, but I understand it. And henceforth, this is part of the problem of a growing deficit like we have here in the US, which probably will lead to some level, I hope not, but of deflation, inflation, for sure, higher taxes, interest rates incredibly low. Maybe we could rebuild our infrastructure and with growth, grow our way out of it. That would be optimistic. I hope so. And again, how some families feel. But you also have to look at it in terms of how are we compared to other countries. And we only see the negative. but there's many, many positives compared to others that we have to look at from our perspective here in the U.S. Other questions we like to know are how family and their SFOs, what do they think about? How are they making decisions? What are they reading? So a Grant's interest rate observer came up a couple of times, a guest that we've had multiple times on my show, and I've had Jim Grant as well on my podcast, but Adam Robinson, who's a wonderful, really deep thinker and thought leader in the world of investing, is wonderful. Larry McDonald, an economist, and his work in bear traps, and even a little bit of Peter Schiff, who again tends to be very, very bearish at the moment, and gold. But I would say no matter your political leanings, families try to be unemotional, not attached to the decision they make, and the information they take in should not be the confirmation biased, only what they want to read to help them or listen to or watch, whatever it might be. You want to have both sides of the fence and be able to unemotionally make an intellectual decision based on a number of factors. Being cool and calm and making the right decision is more important than making a quick decision. And again, it comes back to, what have I said a million times? The family's already rich. I think they want to stay that way. Mitigating and hedging risk, having proper liquidity are all going to be important things. So that basically is kind of in recapping relatively briefly by my standards in about, half an hour, 35 minutes, how families are allocating, how they're thinking. I hope you found it of some value. To give a little bit of further clarity for those that don't know me, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the founder and CEO at Family Office Association, a global membership organization dedicated to families of great success and their single-family offices. And I've been doing this a long, long time. We're one of the most tenured and largest of the organizations of our type. I do personally a significant amount from my books, my magazine, my podcasting. I'm the host of Angelo Robles's Effective Family Office podcast on Apple and most other platforms. Family Office is my YouTube channel for our videos that lately during COVID-19 we've been expanding and being very, very active in. We truly are a deeper thinker and thought leader dedicated intellectually to the community, and I do take pride in that. And then when people ask, what do? I usually lead with that because that's something that's near and dear to my heart, that I enjoy, that I truly think provides value. Now, in a normal world, I also host a lot of events, and I've interviewed and I've had as speakers Ray Dalio, Peter Thiel, Tony Robbins, Steve Cohen, Paul Tudor Jones. I could go on and on. Politics, sports, obviously finance, family office issues, but COVID-19, that's just not happening at the moment. Eventually it will come back, but we just simply uptick our thought leadership and content, and we do things differently. You adapt to thrive, and this is what families need to do generationally. How do they adapt and thrive during challenging times? I'm the biggest fan of Nassim Taleb and his great work on Anti-Fragile, which basically is more than being resilient or adapting. It's actually thriving and profiting potentially during quote-unquote challenging times. So we have a member portal, 24/7 member peer-to-peer communication anywhere around the world, and also disseminating some of our best and latest best practices and trends, but really me and the families and the family to family communicating internally, a COVID-19 or no COVID-19. I also host Monday through Friday, but give me a couple of days off here and there, but Monday through Friday, an online meeting events series for my members. Some of it is strictly peer-to-peer. No experts, no answers, just a lot of questions and learning and sharing from each other. But I also do a lot of deep hour-and-a-half plus interviews with some amazing people and thought leaders. Adam Robinson, who I mentioned earlier, Jeremy Grantham, the legendary philanthropist and co-founder of GMO, Anthony Scaramucci, Peter Schiff, and really the best experts in family offices and policy and procedures and processes and adapting to a remote workforce. I mean, I'm a single family office nerd. It's my life, my passion, my obsession. It is my purpose, as I noted earlier when I kicked this off. So whether you're a family member or an SFO executive or even someone that services the community and wants to be more active in it, especially during COVID-19, don't just sit back and do nothing. Get better, adapt, and learn how to thrive during these challenges environments. So it's been great for us to also work in the way that I'm working within Family Office Association, adapting our value added. We also have a whole slew of consultative services, my dream team of global, the best right and left brain creative thinkers and strategists in technical capabilities as well, coupled with what we're doing in what's called in consultant circles as tabletop simulation, stress testing the family office, playing out what-if scenarios. So the next COVID-19, the family could realize their blind spots, enhance and improve to go from good to great, great to exceptional, exceptional to world-level elite. And yes, I mean, I sit on a perch and have been doing this for a long time, where I suppose I might have some insight and the ability to guide and know thousands of people and the opportunity to help bring in the right relationships to a family and an SFO and make them be great is something that I love to do and am passionate by. On that note, I think I went on long enough. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. Again, Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office Podcast, founder and CEO at Family Office Association. Reach out to me anytime. I'm very active on social media, especially now doing all these lives on Instagram and LinkedIn. My main website is familyofficeassociation.com, and my email is angelo@familyofficeassociation.com. Thank you so much.